right, I think it's time to get started. So hello, everyone. Happy Thursday and welcome to the last session of Putting the Policy into Practice. We've made it through 4 days of great institutional strategies, DMP, data deposits, and general tri-agency RDM policy discussion stuff. I think that covered everything. My name is Jennifer Abel. I am the training coordinator for the Alliance RDM team. And I am speaking to you today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. So in today's session, we are having a panel on institutional strategy development at institutions across the country. We have speakers from 4 academic institutions representing a diversity of institution types, as well as stages of development of their respective institutional RDM strategies. The discussion, which also will include the granting agencies as necessary and appropriate, will address approaches, challenges, successes, and next steps with regard to the strategy development process. At the end of this session, after a little break, we will also have a wrap up of what we've done over this week. And talk about some of the next steps that we'll be taking. Mark Leggett will be leading us in that discussion, so please stick around for that if you're available. Some housekeeping notes before we get started. You have been muted automatically when you entered the room. This webinar is being recorded and the chat may be archived for those who are unable to attend. And just a quick note, thanks to all who've emailed me to ask about when the recordings will be available. I'm anticipating that those will be going up over the course of the next week. We encourage you to use the latest version of Zoom so that you have access to all of the features, including security updates, and a reminder, if it asks you to update your security features during the course of this session, maybe wait until afterwards so you don't miss anything. Please use the chat feature if you're having technical difficulties or if you have additional resources to share. And please use the Q&A option to ask questions of the presenters. Questions will be addressed at the end of the session. You can also raise your hand if you wish to ask a question. Questions may be asked in English or in French. A reminder of the code of conduct that we're following in these sessions. I guess it's not a reminder if this is your first time here, but for those of you who've been here over the week, it is a reminder that we're seeking to provide a welcoming, engaging, and safe community for everyone. That discriminatory language is not appropriate in any venue or platform, and that we don't tolerate harassment in any form. Harassment is understood as any behavior that threatens another person or group or produces an unsafe environment. So please play nicely with each other. You've been doing so well so far. Please note as well that simultaneous interpretation is available for this session. We will have speakers speaking in both French and English, so we will be translating appropriately. There are no slides for today's session, so you don't have to worry about those. I think that covers all of the housekeeping. So let's get into who our presenters are today, our speakers are today. And this is going in more or less alphabetical order with some late additions. James Doiron, who you've met before, is the Research Data Management Services Coordinator for University of Alberta Library and the Academic Director of the University of Alberta Research Data Center. He is co-chair of the Portage Network Data Management Planning Expert Group and is a member of both the National Training Expert Group and the Dataverse North Expert Group. Alexandra Hook is the college librarian at Aurora College in the Northwest Territories, which has 3 campuses, 21 community learning centers, and 3 research centers across the Northwest Territories. Alex is part of Aurora's Institutional RDM Strategies Steering Committee with a particular interest in building the library's capacity to play a key role in both repository development and researcher support. Cynthia Lisée est bibliothécaire à l'EUCOM depuis 2009 et occupe officiellement le poste de bibliothécaire en soutien à la recherche depuis 2020. Ses fonctions l'appellent à offrir des services en communication savante, bibliométrie et en gestion des données de recherche. Elle est impliquée dans les travaux institutionnels concernant l'espace Dataverse de l'UQAM et l'élaboration de la stratégie institutionnelle pour la GDR. Elle est aussi présidente du groupe de travail GDR du sous-comité des bibliothèques du BCI et est membre du groupe de travail sur la gouvernance de l'assistant PGD de l'Alliance de recherche numérique du Canada, which I should be able to say because it is the organization I work for. Erin MacPherson. Erin MacPherson, I've lost your bio. No, I haven't. There it is. Erin MacPherson is the Research and Instruction Librarian at Dalhousie University. She is based on the Dalhousie University Agricultural Campus in Truro and is a liaison librarian for the Faculty of Agriculture and also works in research data management. Erin was involved in the creation of Dalhousie's first institutional strategy, which is now under revision. And as well, we have with us today Suzanne Board, who is the Deputy Director for Policy and International at SSHRC. Over the past several years, she's been directly involved in the development of the tri-agency research data management policy, and now in the activities of the agencies to support its implementation. Her other current responsibilities at SSHRC include corporate strategy, international relations, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. So a great diverse panel today, and I will stop sharing my screen because you don't want to see those, you want to see some people. And there are some people, great. All right, so as I've mentioned to the panelists, but I'll mention to the audience as well, this will be basically a round robin. I will ask a question, we will go through the panelists, have some discussion, and then go on to the next question until we get through, until our time is up, basically. So we're going to start with a pretty basic question, I would say at this point, which is how far along is your institution in developing its institutional RDM strategy? And I'm going to start at the top of my alphabetical list with James.
Sure, great. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. And just before I jump in, I actually just want to give a big shout out to Jen for all the work she's been doing all week. She's been the face of this event and all the sessions. But for those of us who are on the organizing and development working group for the sessions, we know that using the iceberg analogy, that what you're seeing here is just the tip of what she's done, and so much under the hood has gone into it. She is definitely the one that's been keeping things moving along and driving. So just a big thanks. And also to the folks providing translation services. They've been excellent. And I'm sure I'm echoing what others are feeling. It's so nice to be able to have an event like this and not have to separate folks, as a function of language, for us to all be able to be here together. So with that said, so how far along are we on our development work for the institutional strategy? So I think the check mark next to the box would be in process for sure. We have had a working group ratified for the better part of, I think, 2 years or so now. We've all been anticipating to some degree the release of the tri-agency policy about a year earlier than it was, but due to COVID, of course, it was delayed. So if there's a shining light at all to be found, which is really tough to even think about, but gave a little bit more time, at least from a development standpoint. We are comprised of key stakeholders from across key offices and areas across campus. And I just want to note that those are really willing volunteers to come in. Nobody's been, in quotations, voluntold, so to speak. Everybody's on there wanting to be part of the work. It's very collegial, and it's great to have all of those perspectives, as we bring it to the table and as we do work on it. So we've got lots of foundational pieces in place. There's a high level of engagement. The library, where I work out of, in particular, has, a few people on the working group. And of course, library traditionally has some of the, I think, the pragmatic solutions in place for some of the RDM needs, things like data repositories. And of course, at U of A, we host the DMP assistance, so we're very much in the thick of DMP related activities. We also have a new, not new to U of A, but new to the RDM portfolio, Associate VP Research, Laura Beard, who's coming on board. We're actually having our first meeting with her next week. And she's great to work with. Again, I think she's on this likely, so we're really looking forward to working with her. So where we're at, pragmatically, in many ways, I think that we're I think of it, this is just me speaking, I kind of think of it as like the agile approach. So for those folks who worked in, technical development activities where, you've got a number of activities happening simultaneously, and you're all trying to get to the peak of the mountain. And sometimes some things are happening a little faster, or things progress in one place more than the other, but we're not, just focusing all on one piece of it. And we're also thinking further ahead around not just the development of the strategy, but the implementation phases as well. That's going to be some of the next steps. So I think it's safe to say at this point, we're refreshing our approach a little bit and the process that we will use to support both our current and our forward needs. So maybe taking a little less of an ad hoc approach on some of them and kind of formalizing a bit more. And then turning now to the actual strategy development. So where we've been at in terms of some deliverables, we've got a set of principles that we've developed, and those again took some time and took a lot of holistic perspective coming into it that can help then to really set the stage as we move forward to the next phase, which is the development of the strategy, which I then see as informing down the road, and maybe not that far down the road, but certainly down the road, development and implementation of policies and procedures that will go to speak to supporting, the detailed pieces around it. So some of the other things we're looking at too is establishing a network of experts on campus, so to speak, across different areas of research data management, as well as developing and implementing an online hub for RDM information sharing. So that would connect, not just the colleagues that, I'm working with on the development of the strategy in their offices and the things they're doing, but also our end users, our researchers, graduate students, and so forth. So lots on the go, very much in process, but it's great to just kind of take these steps forward. And now as we enter into starting to see the finish line, that March 2023. And I really just think we view 2022 as a big year for, kind of mapping out our work, coming into meeting, deliverables that we're looking for, and always recognizing, and I think I've said a few times in session this week, that anybody's strategy in my mind is a version 1.0. This is very much work in process and an evolving landscape. So just getting something out there that works for us for now, and then realizing that there's going to be some work moving forward as it gets used, and as we see where there might be areas for efficiencies and improvements on them.
Great, thanks. Alex, let's go to you. You're muted still.
Sorry about that. Continually forget. Just to add a little more to give you some context for Aurora College. So we are spread far and wide, but we are spread thinly. So we have a student FTE of well under 1,000 FTE even across this territory. Also, to add to the context, I'd like to give our land acknowledgement, as I haven't spoken before. So Aurora College is situated on the traditional territories and homeland of the Dene, Inuit, and Métis peoples of the Northwest Territories. And we are grateful to the many Indigenous peoples of the NWT for allowing us the opportunity to learn, work, and live on their lands. We are also deeply grateful for the generous sharing of traditional knowledge, wisdom, and ways of knowing, being, and doing with our students and employees, which kind of sets the context for our RDM journey, which we are at the beginning of, and we thank you for asking us to participate. Aurora College, through the leadership of its research division, which is called Aurora Research Institute, has been eligible for Tri-Council funding since 2014 and continues to strengthen its research presence. And another big journey we're on is that Aurora College is also currently in progress toward becoming a polytechnic university. So to turn to your specific questions, well, we began from scratch this past summer, so it's brand new for us. As a small institution that doesn't currently do a large amount of research, Aurora College lacked any formalized data management strategies that were applied across the entire institution. So our first step was to meet with James, actually, from here and from U of A, to get some advice on how to get started. And he gave us a whole afternoon of his time and expertise. And then we followed Portage's template and surveyed the college's research staff to identify any formal or informal RDM practices that they're using, to ask what data management and storage needs they anticipate in the future, and to assess their perceptions and attitudes towards data management. The survey results indicated no strong themes, mostly ad hoc to meet a need, and they've been written up now and will be used to inform our RDM strategy as we move forward. So now we are looking at repository options and starting to identify stakeholders who will be involved in the development of formalized data management practices. For example, we partner with a lot of Indigenous and community researchers, so we will need to develop practices that meet their needs, as well as OCAP and similar Indigenous defined principles.
Great. So two kind of contrasting points of development at this point. Cynthia, à vous.
Merci. Ben nous, à l'UQAM, on a commencé les travaux au printemps 2018. On était une équipe réduite là, pour avoir une certaine agilité. Sûrement qu'avec d'autres questions, je pourrais donner plus de détails, là, qui était vraiment impliqué dans l'élaboration. Mais donc, on a commencé en printemps 2018, puis de sorte qu'en janvier 2019, on avait vraiment une version bien avancée, une ébauche là, avec laquelle on peut vraiment travailler. Puis là, on a élargi pour inclure des collaborateurs d'autres services pour vraiment avoir une version plus robuste. Bon, là, il y a eu la COVID, bon, on pourrait parler de tout ce qui peut retarder une stratégie, mais disons que l'idée, c'était nous, on avait fait comme une ébauche très bien avancée pour qu'avec l'ensemble des services, on puisse avoir une version robuste, qu'on se dit, OK, si on peut aller en consultation élargie avec toute la communauté. Donc, la version robuste, on a eu le OK de tous les services en juin 2021. Ce qui fait que, donc, on est encore en train d'élaborer la stratégie, mais là, on est à l'étape où on veut aller tester auprès de notre communauté de chercheurs pour vraiment, après, retravailler, pour vraiment finir de la rédiger à temps pour 2023. Fait que c'est en gros là, notre horizon de temps là, autour de la stratégie.
So just to sum that up for our panel, EUCOM started their work on the strategy in 2018 and had a good, robust draft by 2019 with a number of players from across the university coming in to help bring that together. Of course, COVID intervened, as it has for all of us. But by June of this year, the draft was at a stage where it could really start to be shared out with the community of researchers and workshopped and elaborated on, worked on in preparation for getting it into shape for 2023, more or less. Merci. And Erin, going over to you.
Hi, I'm here taking notes while everybody's talking because there's so many things I'm interested in. So we have an initial strategy approved, developed prior to the tri-agency's formal adoption of the policy. So our Dean of Libraries was chair of the Portage Institutional Strategy Committee. I believe that's what it was called back in 2018, 2017. So it was a priority for us. That being said, it's an initial strategy and it's a living document. And so right now we're working on like a bridge document, like progress from there, but then developing a more fulsome like 2.0 strategy, we call it, because we're attending these sessions right now, and there's been so much more new resources that have come out that we like to be able to implement in our planning process as well. And and there's many more resources available. One of the things we had planned for it was to be reviewed every 2 years, and it is on that year. So we're in the middle of that and currently attending these sessions and making notes. I can talk about this a bit more in the next question, but I guess for me, when it's kind of started, when I was hired, I developed a project charter for the research data management team. So some of that work had kind of started with that. But just to go back to what James said, anything, we've got our first crack at it. But yeah, there's so many more resources that Portage has come out with that that's where we are now. Looking forward to continuing. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Erin, and everyone. And I think that actually leads into what was not the next question on my list, but I think is the next logical place to go from that is, where did you start? What were your, everybody's kind of talked about that to a certain extent, but where were your first steps taken? Or where are you taking your first steps? Because there are definitely people on this call who are still looking at those first steps and wondering where to go. Alex, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, over the winter, we will begin planning engagement and information sessions that will inform the development of RDM policies and procedures at Aurora College. So these sessions will be geared to first college staff and faculty with the goal of raising awareness and increasing uptake in RDM practices, and also geared to our external partners with the goal of discovering their needs and concerns regarding RDM practices, such as OCAP considerations for research data collected with or on behalf of Indigenous communities.
Great. Cynthia.
Nous, les premières étapes, ça a vraiment été en équipe très réduite. Disons, dans le passé, il y avait déjà des collaborations bien établies entre le service des bibliothèques et le service recherche et création. Donc, c'est venu naturellement là, quand il était question pour la gestion des données de recherche, d'élaborer une stratégie. Donc, c'était vraiment une petite équipe, c'était 4 personnes, 2 professionnels, 2 directeurs. Donc, il y avait le directeur des services en soutien à la recherche de la bibliothèque. Il y avait moi, de bibliothèque. Ensuite, il y avait le directeur du service de la recherche-création et un conseiller à la recherche de ce service-là. Donc, les professionnels, on faisait beaucoup, on a travaillé, c'était vraiment bicéphale, donc on a travaillé beaucoup à la rédaction, c'était vraiment les directeurs qui, eux, orientaient puis validaient. L'idée, c'était qu'on ne va pas rédiger à 4 mains. Donc, on pensait beaucoup à agilité. Et puis, quand on a eu une ébauche satisfaisante, on s'est dit, OK, là, on a vraiment besoin d'input d'autres services. Donc là, on était allé chercher des collègues du service informatique, puis du service des archives et de la gestion documentaire. Puis là, c'était vraiment, là, eux, leur mandat, c'était d'aller bonifier, valider, modifier vraiment, enrichir la stratégie de leur perspective, parce que nous, on avait mis des éléments de base, mais on ne peut pas deviner, il y a quand même des boîtes noires là, dans les services qui nous sont étrangers. Donc, c'était vraiment l'idée d'apprendre à travailler ensemble, décloisonner. C'était vraiment les énergies des premières étapes étaient là-dessus. On est parti d'une collaboration, que je pourrais dire naturelle. Elle s'est fabriquée là, dans les années 2014, 15, 16. Mais pour la suite, avec le service informatique, service des archives, on avait encore moins de liens. Donc, ça a vraiment été là-dessus qu'on a misé pour la suite des travaux. Puis ça a été, il y a eu diverses interruptions, mais c'était essentiellement plusieurs petites rencontres entre professionnels. Et puis, à certains moments clés, on demandait qu'avec tous les directeurs, donc là, on était 4 professionnels, mais il y avait 5 directeurs parce que au niveau des services informatiques, c'est beaucoup plus complexe là, comme organisation. Fait qu'on avait un directeur des infrastructures, puis des plateformes technologiques. Puis on avait aussi un directeur des services aux utilisateurs, donc 2 directeurs des services informatiques, puis un directeur pour chacun des autres services. Mais on avait un seul professionnel du service informatique là, qui est habitué d'interagir avec les chercheurs. Donc, c'est ça. Donc, on continue de travailler à 4 professionnels, mais on retournait, on pourrait dire régulièrement, pas à chaque mois, là, mais à des moments clés, on retournait auprès des directeurs. Parce qu'on s'était vraiment dit, si on veut bâtir, avoir une stratégie pour bâtir des capacités, ben, il faut vraiment s'assurer que le socle des services soit solide. Donc, pendant assez longtemps, on n'était pas directement en consultation auprès des chercheurs. C'est vraiment nos premières étapes, c'était très concentré autour des services, apprendre à travailler ensemble, les services.
So again, just for our panelists, EUCOM started out with a fairly small group, 2 folks from the library and 2 folks from the research office, both at the professional staff level and at the directorial managerial level, and worked on a draft that way. And once there was a draft there, took it out to some of the other departments that were going to be involved. So things like IT services and archives and records management. And that collaboration has then added new levels to what's been going on with the document because it's brought in new perspectives. So the team has stayed relatively small. It's still about 4 staff members, professional staff members, and 5 directors now who are on the team. So it hasn't gone out to a big group that's being involved yet, but it's been a way of building up the work that's being done. So starting with the natural collaboration between the library services and the research office, bring in other important stakeholders, and then building from there, I think is the essence of what you've been doing. If there's anything you'd like to add, please feel free.
Je ne sais pas si vous voulez qu'on explique où est-ce qu'on en est rendu maintenant ou si on va en reparler dans une autre question.
We'll talk about that, yeah, in the next question.
Okay.
Questions. Where are we at next? We're at Erin next. You're muted, Erin.
There, okay. I'm used to using Teams all morning and now I'm on Zoom. I think our approach is probably similar to Cynthia's, maybe a little different, but there's definitely similarities. So our Dean of Libraries championed it, so I have to give her a lot of credit. So it was very clear that we want to move forward with this, and plus the Office of Research Services, and really we have a really good relationship with the folks in the research office, and in fact they've been coming to our data management team meetings for at least 6 years, if not more. When I first started, and we have bi-monthly meetings now, and we have 2 representatives from ORS on our team, which is fantastic because we inform them and they inform us, and it's a really good relationship. So thank you. So we had a libraries research data management team, which was librarians and library staff, research office, academic technology, and copyright on that team. And then to help with the strategy, our dean created an ad hoc RDM advisory committee. So that had reps from across campus, including the libraries, ITS, faculty, legal, analytics, and so on. Some of this work we identified when we created this project charter when I first started. And so that was helpful. And then we used the questions from the initial template that Portage developed. And in our strategy, we looked at, or we identified some things that we would want to do, like the RDM survey and things like that. So since then we've done that, but just looking at my notes here. But yeah, we definitely will want to be revisiting that. And so many things have changed in the past few years too. So the policies are now official from the tri-agencies, but Dal has done, you know, a digital governance strategy. And, you know, we'd like to revisit our mission to make sure that all of our stakeholders are on the same page, like our RDM mission. So yeah, that's kind of the first steps we did was our dean and the research office kind of struck this committee and decided who would be the sponsor, and that the libraries would work on it. And yeah, and like I said, it's still ongoing. We still have, you know, we still have our meetings. We still, we've kind of expanded a little bit our reach, I would say. We have librarians sitting on, you know, working with the REBs. We try to do a lot more outreach by doing online webinars that are open to not just Dal, but Atlantic Canada. Yeah, so that's where we are. Those are the key players, I would say, libraries and ORS, but I don't want to leave anybody out. But yeah.
Yes, Cynthia, you had another point.
Oui, en entendant Erin parler de leur expérience, ça m'a rappelé que pour nos premières étapes, on a effectivement utilisé la documentation de portage, la version de 2018. Puis pour nous, c'était très utile parce que ça nous fournissait une méthodologie plutôt que d'avoir à se documenter, faire des choix. On s'est dit, bon, ils ont certainement fait un très bon travail, on va prendre cette méthodologie. Donc ça, c'était un point que je voulais ajouter. Puis par contre, dans la méthode, bon, c'est sûr que ça recommandait de faire une enquête pour connaître les actifs de données, les pratiques de gestion de données. Bon, nous, on a personne qui est dédié à temps plein là, à la gestion des données de recherche. Puis comme on avait fait des projets pilotes pour la rédaction de PGD dans les années 2017, on avait quand même déjà une idée de la disparité des pratiques en gestion des données de recherche. Il y avait aussi l'enquête consortiale là, menée par portage. Il y avait des résultats qui commençaient à sortir. Il y avait des résultats européens d'enquêtes similaires. Puis on voyait que d'une institution à l'autre, c'était souvent le même constat au niveau des pratiques. Nous, dans notre stratégie, en fait, on a inscrit dans la stratégie qu'on émet l'hypothèse que probablement qu'on a le même genre de problématique. Mais tu sais, qu'on va plutôt quand même analyser ces enquêtes-là, voir si du côté sciences humaines et sociales, parce que nous, notre université est très, très forte sur ce texte-là, puis côté GDR, à l'époque, en tout cas, c'était un peu moins documenté, c'était plus là-dessus qu'on voulait faire une surveillance un peu plus serrée. Mais comme on était avec peu de ressources humaines pour être efficace, on s'est dit, on va faire l'hypothèse qu'au niveau des pratiques, là, on peut se fier sur l'ensemble des enquêtes qui montrent que c'est vraiment similaire d'une institution à l'autre. Donc, ça peut aider pour ceux qui se demandent s'ils doivent faire une enquête. Là, nous, on a fait ce choix.
So you're saying that you also started with the portage resources, but then also went into doing some further inquiries about what was happening at your institution. You've done some work on developing and working with researchers on data management plans, but also looking at some of the surveys that had come out from the portage and related groups. And you were also looking at some of the things that were happening across institutions as well? And
il y avait des enquêtes. There were some surveys from European institutions.
Okay, right. Great, thank you. James, coming back to you, where did you, I think you gave us some ideas, but where did you start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo what the others have said. I think some of that's all been baked into ours, certainly taking advantage and leveraging the materials that were released by Portage on the template and the guidance. I mean, those are really good framework types of materials, I think, to set conversations in flow, but they're flexible enough to allow institutions to have, you know, that flexibility to be able to, you know, look at them and apply them to their own context. Certainly, you know, one of the first steps was getting the working group together, getting a group together identifying, you know, those key stakeholder offices and the folks that might make sense, and hopefully we're willing to come aboard and be part of that work. And I'll say that was not a hard one for us. We are really lucky to have, you know, a long and rich history with research data management on U of A campus. And in particular, a lot of relationships between offices were already established for lots of reasons, including my predecessor in this position, Chuck Humphrey, who's around for many, many years. Anyone involved in Research Data Management Canada, you don't even need the last name, you just say Chuck and they know who you're talking about. And he was the inaugural director of Portage for his first 2 years. So, you know, that is just a huge bonus for us, absolutely, to help kind of pave some of those conversations and relationships. Just to give a sense, our working groups is comprised of, and not limited to these by any means, or it may evolve too, but of many stakeholders, including the library, the VP Research Office, our Research Computing and Information Services Technology, Research Ethics Office, Research Services Office, our Faculty of Graduate Studies, Faculty of Native Studies, and so forth. So as I said, we focused in. I mean, I was immediately aware that, and I get why this happens, is a lot of times the conversation goes down into the details, the weeds. You know, how are we gonna meet a DMP requirement? Who's gonna do this? Who's gonna do that? And I get that, and those are important conversations to have. But it's really important to kind of get the higher level stuff in place first, to at least some degree, that can help guide those conversations effectively, and make sure we're talking about things in ways that we should be, and that we've got, you know, the different perspectives in place. So that set of principles is an example that I spoke to. It did take a little while to get through them, and they were really good conversations and eye-opening, I think, all around, certainly for myself as well. But it acknowledges such things as, you know, overarching principles like FAIR and Indigenous data sovereignty. So thinking about the CARE principles and OCAP principles for First Nations data sovereignty and governance. Also, it was really important to acknowledge that we've got a lot of different types of data needs, but we were also thinking about supporting not just funded but unfunded research as well. There's a lot of really important, high quality, unfunded research happening that deserves all of the same supports and has some of the same, you know, concerns and needs as those that are funded. So then, as I mentioned, we do want to move forward with developing and implementing both an online web-based RDM hub, as well as a network of experts across campus. And I'll give a quick shout out to if folks are interested in just what that sounds like and the ideas of it, take a look at Cornell University. They've got a really great model there, and I'm fortunate through my network built up over the years that we've got good friends and colleagues there. So we were able to have a call with them and talk to them a bit about, you know, what they're doing, what works, what doesn't. And we're kind of thinking about that model a bit and how we can apply it here at U of A moving forward. We're also moving forward with hiring a project coordinator to support some of the logistics and project management needs. Because it's like anything, if everyone's doing it, well, it's off the side of desks and everybody's busy, and we don't want to burden folks with with logistics if we can possibly do that. So we're looking to get some support there moving forward, and then just planning our activities for supporting the development of the strategy and to some degree implementing in those peripheral things I'm talking about through 2022. So we're having a meeting next week where I kind of think of it as a kind of a reconvening. It's our subgroup, so, you know, some key core people from that larger group, and I imagine we'll probably look at that finish line in 2023 and work backwards to some degree, and what do we want in place by when, and just kind of give us a bit of a roadmap to work with as we move forward.
Great, thanks so much, everyone. Something that's come up as we've been going through this conversation, there seem to be some common key players that are coming into play across all of these discussions. So usually the library is involved, the research office is involved, IT and computing infrastructure, research ethics boards, faculties of graduate studies, I've heard, Indigenous communities and responsible parties within or outside of the university. Is there anyone, I'm going to throw this out to everyone, whoever wants can answer it. Is there anyone who you either would like to get involved in the process who you haven't gotten involved yet, or anyone whose involvement has kind of, whose importance in the process has kind of surprised you as to how much it's helped the process going forward? Anyone can jump in.
Well,
Yeah,
I
James.
can jump in just really quickly. So who we want to have involved, and this might actually speak to a couple of the questions I've seen in the Q&A section, is kind of the outreach and engagement out there. And you know, we have to think about, you know, what are we ultimately looking to do? And we're ultimately looking to support research and research excellence in, you know, all the, you know, great ways that we can, and open science and appropriateness across, you know, the different types of data and across the research life cycle. So we'd be remiss to not be considering the researchers themselves and the graduate students, tomorrow's researchers, how to, you know, the HQPs. I love working with graduate students, by the way. It's a long time ago since I was one, but it makes me feel like I'm one again sometimes. And so we do want to definitely have feedback. And I think, you know, one of the other panelists kind of mentioned is that you have to balance between, you know, agility and being able to get things move forward and getting that important feedback. So I imagine for us, again, that will be some of the conversations and planning for 2022. And I'm happy to say, I don't think that I have anything that's super surprising. Like, we've got a large, robust, you know, group, as I've kind of described. I'm not surprised that we have these folks on board, but I'm pleasantly surprised with where some of the work has already gone and some of the things that we're already, you know, working on. And a great example, just as one is, and I know Susan's on the call right now, our director of our research ethics office, Susan Babcock, is on our working group, and she and I and some others in her office have been working on revamping and revising some of the data related questions on ethics application forms with, you know, the strategy in mind, and with current, you know, RDM practices and best practices and supports in mind. So it's that type of thing that becomes, you know, very pragmatic and applied. And so I'm really happy to see stuff like that happening, but not surprised necessarily. Yeah.
Oui, Cynthia.
Nous, notre démarche, comme actuellement, on est rendu à faire une consultation élargie à l'ensemble de la communauté, justement, bon, évidemment, pour nos chercheurs, mais c'est aussi pour éviter d'avoir des angles morts dans la stratégie, parce qu'on n'a pas le choix. Là. Pour rédiger, on ne peut pas rédiger à 100 personnes, puis avoir, à un moment donné, il faut faire avec un document qu'on est prêt à martyriser. Mais donc, notre approche, c'est de faire des consultations via des focus group. Donc, on va identifier des catégories de personnes qu'on sait qui ont, là, on va arriver avec des questions très spécifiques. On va leur, ben, ce focus group, on va arriver, mettons, bon, la stratégie dit telle chose, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Est-ce qu'il manque quelque chose? Puis en pensant à la composition de nos focus group, puis même avec d'autres focus group, en échangeant eux-mêmes, nous disent hey, « vous devriez consulter telle personne ». Puis une catégorie qui, de prime abord, on n'avait pas pensé, c'est de faire finalement un focus group auprès de chercheurs qui ont assumé des rôles d'évaluation, de demande de subvention. On se dit ah, c'est vrai, peut-être que ça pourrait vraiment venir enrichir, donner une perspective qu'on n'aurait pas pensé, comment nous, on a approché le développement des capacités. Mais... Fait que ça, c'est un exemple d'angle mort qu'au départ, on n'avait pas du tout envisagé, puis c'est vraiment en commençant la consultation avec différents groupes que ça a émergé. Mais sinon, je ne sais pas si vous comprenez l'idée, on a des focus group pour des chercheurs de chaque faculté, focus group juste les conseillers à la recherche, avec accent éthique, accent propriété intellectuelle. Donc, c'est ce qu'on fait cet automne, puis probablement que ça va s'étendre un peu cet hiver. Comme par exemple focus group avec les étudiants des cycles supérieurs, ça risque d'être cet hiver. Puis après avoir collecté toutes ces données-là, là, on va vraiment faire un dernier tour de roue pour vraiment ajuster pour 2023. C'est notre façon donc de combler des différentes opinions, donc des angles morts certainement, mais est-ce qu'il y a eu des éléments de surprise au niveau des contributions, pas jusqu'ici? Mais il reste encore plusieurs mois avec peut-être des surprises.
Right. So no surprises yet in terms of who needs to be involved. But one thing that you've been working with extensively has been focus groups, and you're working with them right now to get answers to specific questions about the draft that you have and things that might be missing and perspectives that might not have been included. So one of the really interesting ones is people who are doing peer review for grant applications and the things that they are bringing to those discussions. But also, you know, researchers in different faculties, students in different faculties, et cetera. So a lot of specific discussions with specific groups that are ongoing now. Any other? Yeah, Alex.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, we're just starting out right now. We just have a little 4-person RDM steering committee, which includes 3 reps from the Aurora Research Institute, a research division, and myself from the libraries. But we plan to grow soon to include all the areas that you mentioned, and also looking at engaging with our Center for Teaching and Learning, which is our recently developed sort of staff and faculty support and professional development unit, which is sort of part of our developed, I think, as part of our polytechnic journey. But also for us key players, the college conducts most of its research in partnership with external groups. So for us, key players are not only members from Indigenous and community organizations that I've already mentioned, but also research associates whose primary affiliation is with another institution. So we see those as being part of our key players.
Yeah, definitely. The external groups can play an important role too. Erin, you had your hand up?
Yes, I just put it down when just as you started speaking. But yeah, there's I would say with us maybe not a lot of surprises either as to who we would like involved. You know, going forward, there's definitely more consultation that we'd like to do, which is of course part of the process. But one of the things that I found coming through it is that, you know, you're not alone during it. RDM is everyone's responsibility. And they're like the stakeholders across campus all have a role to play too. And that's one of the things that emerged over the past few years, even things that seem maybe so little, but they're so important, like our Office of Research Services was able to put a question on the researcher checklist, like, do you have a DNP, and links out to resources. And that's so useful that, you know, we have that partnership and they can do that. It's a way to track things, a way to also, you know, point to, you know, you can contact these people for help. Here's the resources. And that's coming out of the ORS office, but it's in partnership with the libraries and then Portage and other stakeholders. So for me, one of the big things is that, you know, you want to do all the things, but everybody has that role that they can play in research data management, and just will bring it together at the institutional level. So that's probably it's not necessarily surprising, but it's a good thing that you're not alone, and it's no one unit, but multiple stakeholders have a role they can play. That's kind of the fun thing, seeing how you can work together.
Yeah, I think we should get T-shirts printed that say RDM is everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's a quote.
Oui, la GDR, la responsabilité de tous, right? One side in English, one side in French, depending on where you are. Great, that was a lot of great insights into the players involved. Getting into, I guess, not necessarily negative, but maybe more serious. What are your institution's current barriers or challenges to supporting RDM that might be affecting your strategy development or planning? Cynthia, je pense que nous commencerons avec vous.
Oui, on a quelques défis. Premièrement, on n'a pas d'employé qui est à 100% dédié à la gestion des données de recherche. Donc, moi, je suis peut-être la plus proche de ce qui pourrait se ressembler à ça, là, dans le sens que c'est vraiment un de mes dossiers. Le conseiller à la recherche, c'est aussi dans ces dossiers, mais il y avait déjà, il est très multitâche. Mon collègue Rachid, qui doit être dans l'assistance d'ailleurs, je suis très contente de travailler avec lui. Mais donc, c'est ça, c'est une difficulté. On n'a pas de ressources humaines dédiées. Mais donc, il y a aussi un autre collègue aux bibliothèques, là, au niveau de l'administration de Dataverse, le côté technologique qui est plus impliqué. Mais sinon, tous mes autres collègues, on rajoute ça là, sur la pile. Puis, il n'y a pas de nouvel argent. Donc, il faut planifier. Nous, on a fait notre stratégie en se disant, il n'y a pas de nouvel argent, il faut planifier avec les capacités qu'on a actuellement, comment on peut s'arranger. C'est vraiment comme ça qu'on l'a pensé, là, pour espérer d'avoir quelque chose de réaliste. Puis bon, là, je crois que maintenant, il y a un des défis, difficultés qui est réglé. Pendant de 2018 jusqu'à il n'y a pas si longtemps, il y avait des changements administratifs. Là. Soit on change de vice-recteur, soit on change de direction générale à la bibliothèque, soit, comme récemment, mon directeur faisait l'intérim de notre direction. Mais tout ça fait que administrativement, quand tu n'as pas tes directeurs disponibles, ben, tu veux une réunion, puis ça prend 3 mois avant que la réunion puisse se faire, par exemple. Donc là, tout est stable administrativement, mais donc c'est quelque chose à considérer. C'est vraiment, si du côté des hautes directions, faut qu'ils restent en santé et qu'ils ne soient pas malades, sinon tout gèle. Et puis, un autre défi vraiment particulier, c'est on sent vraiment, c'est ce qui ressent beaucoup plus récemment encore, là, le fait qu'on n'a pas de balise claire de la part des organismes de financement concernant les coûts GDR. Ben, mettons qu'on veut développer des outils, mais on ne sait pas exactement, est-ce que c'est 5% qui est correct ou qu'est-ce que... Bon, c'est trop flou. Ce qui fait que nous, par rapport à la stratégie, si on veut vraiment articuler c'est quoi le développement de nos capacités, sans trop savoir c'est quoi finalement qui va être budgété dans les subventions. Il y a comme oui, on va faire avec, mais pour nous, c'est quelque chose qui nous aiderait si on avait des balises plus claires.
So summing up, I know I got the first 3. Not enough people, no dedicated full-time employees. No new money, unfortunately. Administrative changes, which was kind of interesting because the players at the top level have been changing, which makes it hard to have 1, meetings and 2, continuity. But also information about funding and from the granting agencies as well, it sounded like.
Yeah, we think we don't have enough indications about what cost is eligible for
right
grant.
Okay, yes, the eligible costs for research data management and what can be counted. Yes. Merci. Erin, your barriers and challenges. Not personally, but at Dell, in the area of RDM.
I think in my notes I said I'm going to speak on behalf of myself, not my institution. No, I'm just joking. Well, I would say, some similar challenges. If it were me, I'd have a position for this, a position for that, and I have a lot of ideas. So one of the challenges is, of course, we want to do all of the things, and I personally have a giant wish list in my head and many things we could do, and not enough time or resources to do it. We've had some similar changes, like the RDM has kind of moved portfolio, where it sat in our structure kind of moved a few times. So I mean that has its challenges, but I think for me, I'll just speak on behalf of myself. For me personally, it's recognizing when some things are better done at a national level and don't have to be done locally. So you look at all of the things in RDM, like there's curation, there's a repository, there's DMVs, blah blah blah, so many things. some of those things are going to be handled at a different level. And, you know, it's just keeping that awareness, keeping our community aware, like the Dal community aware of what's happening, was an important thing to recognize. The other thing, and it goes back to the t-shirt, is for years I've been advocating for an RDM team, that it's not just a one person job or part of a job. That's my personal perspective on it. But if you look at the tri-agencies policy that came out, institutions, librarians, data managers, research, you know, there's a responsibility at every level. So I feel that it's not just one person or place that has that responsibility. It's recognizing where each unit or each stakeholder can bring that to the table and that support. So personally, that was a challenge to get to that point where it's like, yeah, it's not just the library, it's not just me, it's not just whatever. There's a wealth of resources out there. And so growing that team, of course, you know, it takes a number of years and we're not there yet. You'll probably see that we're expanding. But you know, for a while it was me on the Truro campus and a few other people, but now we have a great team. You know, we have ORS sitting on our RDM team. We have librarians with the REBs. We have a number of librarians giving workshops on DMPs, but I agree that that is a challenge, having all the people, all the money, you know, everything that you need. So yeah, recognizing what we can and can't do. And I think that's important also because, you know, maybe these are things that we can raise at a national level. Like maybe this is something that should be supported at a national level. I used to work at a smaller institution and I still have that always in the back of my mind, like, you know, is this something realistically that we should try, or is this something that us as a whole can do? Yeah. Thanks.
Great. James, over to you.
No challenges at all. Everything was just
None? Really?
no, everything was good. No, I mean, there's always going to be some challenges, and you know, looking back at all the projects I've been part of, different levels and such. Actually, the challenges are, you know, maybe not at the time, but later on you realize that was actually some of the most important things, and some of the fun, I guess, when you look back. I mean, there's some merit in just, you know, being able to look back and say, hey, we had challenges, we worked together on them, and you know, we got past them. You can't solve problems you can't talk about. There could be, you know, necessary tensions at times about certain you know, topics and you know, approaches, and that's the value of having, you know, a group, you know, like I've described at U of A anyways, working on it. So, you know, there's some pragmatic challenges. I would echo what others have said in terms of, you know, resources and capacity. It's kind of like, you know, I remember my first aha lesson really early on in my, you know, soft grant environment, grant writing days, and going, oh wait, there's not a grant to write grants. You know, there's a lot of time and effort and energy going into that, and you have to find resources and the time, and time is one of the, you know, our greatest resources we have. So, you know, planning ahead for those things and supporting them. We've also had administrative changes, and I think there's, generally speaking, you have to anticipate that's going to happen on any project. But, you know, when we're talking about things at institution level, that certainly can be a challenge. We've had, since the start of our, you know, working group put together, we've had a new president come into the university. We've had just recently a new VP research. And as I mentioned, we've got some portfolio changes on the actual group there working on. And again, those are just general challenges, but I find that, you know, everyone we work with, it's been positive, and if it just takes a bit of time to get folks up to speed, or, you know, bring you know, that new perspective to the table, then so be it. COVID's obviously been a challenge, I think, across the board for everyone. I'm not going to say that I miss the commute, but you know, I certainly recognize where it poses the challenge, and it's nice to be able to be in rooms together and working together, and can be more efficient at times. But in some ways, we've actually had more efficiencies sometimes virtually too. So you just, you know, you take whatever the hand is you're dealt, and you work with it. Here, and for any folks that are on the call that are based out of post-secondary institutions, in particular in Alberta, the post-secondary sector, among others, have taken a very hard hit in terms of budgets and budget cuts, and U of A is absolutely no exception. So that's been a big challenge as well. But also for here at U of A, that has been the catalyst for major restructuring on campus that has been occurring and still very much is occurring. So we now have 3 colleges that go across the natural, social, and health sciences, with faculties coming underneath those, and then a lot of consolidation of services. I know my colleague Scott Dillinger is on, he works with IST, and they're working hard on a lot of centralizing into some degree of different services, identifying where that makes sense and trying to be more efficient, with what we're working with. So, anytime you have that type of restructuring happen, it's going to be a challenge, and I think we'll be talking about that as well, and what that means to us in terms of our outreach as we move forward in 2022, and how we can best do those activities in a meaningful way and get folks input onto the work that we're doing, and then just thinking about when you say the actual challenges to supporting RDM, I think about some more pragmatic solutions, and I always think about the work's never done, right? We always have the next thing to work on. So whether, again, we're in a unique position hosting the National DMP Assistant Platform, and I, by virtue of co-chairing the DMP Expert Group and working, on that platform, I think, very hard about, our responsibility and working well with Portage and delivering this national service. And it seems like there's an infinite number of things we could be doing to work on it, but we have finite time and resources. So we have to be really, cognizant of that and prioritizing the work and making sure we can do the important stuff that needs to be done. And then I think about our own services here. And again, I'm just speak best to what I know, but things like, our institutional data repository, Dataverse. And as of 8 a.m. Mountain Time on Monday, we're migrating it over to the Scholars Portal National Service. And that has been a long, long time and a lot of work coming, on behalf of colleagues here locally, as well as Scholars Portal. But that's another good example of where we're identifying, how do we want to support our researchers and our research data management needs moving forward. It's nice if we can get ahead of the 8 ball, but if we can just get beside it at times, I'm pretty happy there too. So yeah, it's just ongoing. You can't even with the strategies, again, I've come back and said it's a version 1.0. That's great. That's how it should be, so we think about how we can continue the work moving forward and make sure we have the capacity and resources to do that.
Great, thank you. Alex, barriers and challenging challenges you're experiencing.
Well, we're a small institution, and research is almost entirely done within the research division. So many faculty currently do not do research as part of their jobs and do not have a strong understanding of research data management and its requirements or benefits. So there's a learning curve there. Research data management to date has been ad hoc and on an as-needed basis to meet the requirements of funders rather than driven by internal policies or best practices. And a lack of resourcing there, which has been already mentioned. There is no person on staff who has primary responsibility for data management, and there is little knowledge of RDM practices among current staff, including me. So we need outside support, and this is a theme that I think I've heard emerge through this week's sessions, that this is overwhelming for smaller institutions and colleges without a big research component. In the area of institutional capacity, where people wear multiple hats, in the area of Indigenous partnered research, which also falls under a different set of parameters, and for not currently having the resources for data deposit, as it seems that access to Scholars Portal may not be available to us at the moment, as we're not part of OCOL or COPOL or other large consortia. Though I understand they're working on a college model, so I remain hopeful. But for this moment in time, these things seem difficult. Although I do also want to say that the sharing and the offering of resources that we've heard over this week is also overwhelming. I mean, it's it takes a bit of the fear out of it. So thank you.
It's great, thank you. So looking at the time, and we probably want to have a little bit of time for questions at the end. I don't imagine we'll get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can. Wrapping up with, what have been your biggest lessons learned so far in this process? And I don't have anybody in particular I want to start with, I don't think. So I'll just throw it out there. What have been your biggest lessons in the process so far? Okay, we'll go with James first.
I was pointing that way to Cynthia, but realizing that that might not be Cynthia on everyone's screens too.
Yeah, on my screen it was black, so.
I'm pointing at the blackness.
Yeah, that's right.
Lots of lessons learned, little ones, big ones, some probably anticipated, some maybe not as much. I think the biggest takeaway for me is a real appreciation for the complexities. Create an RDM institutional strategy. That's painless if you say it fast enough, right? But there's a lot of detail there, a lot of key offices, and folks need to be involved. And again, for myself, I've been involved in research data management for the better part of 20 years, not by design. I remember one day looking back going, whoa, how did I get here? Because it wasn't what I went to school for, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I know that, but recognizing that this is really new, some of this stuff. And there's education and awareness, and making sure that when we're talking about things, that everyone is thinking about it the same way, or at least understands, what something is. You can't go out there. I can't throw out, start talking about Dataverse and then just make the assumption, as an example, that everybody even knows what it is, or they might think they know what it is and it's not really what it is, or people are thinking about things differently, and that's just one example. So just kind of making sure that we're talking transparently, defining things, and I think that's that's really important. But yeah, the complexities, absolutely, and the need to really, I think, step back and recognize that slow and steady wins the race at times, right? It's nice to get things done quickly, and certain things can get done quickly. And I think that then, looking at what you have ahead of you, and I think this is the type of approach, as I mentioned, we're talking again, kind of revisiting our approach next week. There's probably some things that are easier that can be done fairly quickly. And then there's stuff that you just have to say, look, this is going to take a bit of time, and map out those activities, and they can be happening simultaneously with others. So I think those are kind of my two big takeaways right now.
Great. Cynthia, to you.
Oui, merci. Comme James, la partie sensibilisation, il faut pas prendre pour acquis que parce qu'on a eu une première discussion, le fait que c'est tellement lent comme processus, puis que, bon, comme chez nous, que c'est pas le dossier 100% à quelqu'un, ben quand on se revoit 3 mois après, mettons, bon, moi qui suis plus dans ce dossier-là, j'ai suivi plein de choses, il y a plein de développements que, par exemple, on ne peut pas s'attendre que la professionnelle au service informatique qui va être au courant de ces éléments-là. Donc, à un moment donné, il y a un décalage, puis on le rattrape, tout va bien. Puis à un moment donné, on prend pour acquis des éléments. Donc, il faut tout le temps, il faut vraiment communiquer, pas avoir peur de dire « Ah, regarde, telle chose, ça c'est vraiment important », puis de résumer. Puis, donc, il faut se former entre nous. Puis c'est ça. Donc, sensibiliser tout le temps, puis communiquer, c'est vraiment déjà qu'il faut travailler à briser les silos, apprendre vraiment à travailler en service, mais la base de ça, c'est de faire exprès d'aller parler de la GDR, de qu'est-ce que tu en penses, même si au départ on se dit oh, peut-être que la personne n'aura pas grand-chose à dire, puis finalement, ah non, tu sais, les passions se développent.
So interesting, building on what James had said, not just the process takes a long time, but it requires you to constantly be communicating with the people on the team and to keeping people aware of what's going on, because again, it is everyone's doing it as part of their job, not as their whole job. So people need to be reminded of what happened, say 3 months ago, and where things have changed and how things are going. And breaking down silos between services and departments as well, because that can also be a a barrier to getting things going, but keep engaging in those processes of constantly reminding yourself and the team of what you're doing, communicating with each other. That can really make the process work better as it's going along. More or less. Alex? You're muted, Alex.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
For those who, like us, are just starting out, I think some of our biggest lessons are that the institutional strategy doesn't have to be perfect or even complete by the deadline in March 2023. It can be a work in progress, to be adjusted and expanded to meet evolving needs. That was a really welcome message for us that we heard this week. Also, we are not the only institution starting from scratch. This makes the process much less intimidating and opens up possibilities of collaboration to get through it together. Maybe something will come out of this week's workshops in that vein too. It's also learning that it's okay to look to others and replicate what they're doing. And there are actually a lot of resources out there that can be drawn on and adapted. That was great to learn. And as I mentioned earlier, we've also heard the generosity of the larger institutions this week in the presentations and in the chat. Ultimately, what should be in the RDM strategy is what will work for us, for Aurora College. It's okay to tailor some elements to fit the institution. So these messages have been really reinforced this week, and that is appreciated. And also over this week, it seems like some momentum has built to create shared resources for smaller institutions and colleges. And we are looking forward to learning from the work being done on Indigenous data management that was mentioned in a few of the presentations this week. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Going back to Cynthia.
Je voulais ajouter que la stratégie, pour nous, là, ça va être un outil de communication pour insuffler le changement de culture. Donc, je le mettrai autant comme une leçon apprise que peut-être aussi de la compréhension de qu'est-ce que c'est la stratégie institutionnelle. Ce n'est pas juste un document administratif, pas juste un document tiens, on s'est conformé à ce que les organismes nous demandent. C'est un outil de communication pour nous, un outil de changement là, auquel on peut se référer pour aider tous ensemble à améliorer nos pratiques.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that it's not just about creating an administrative document, it's creating a framework that's going to support creating a culture around RDM at an institution. I think that is something we've all been working towards over a number of years. And this is a way to kind of formalize that and say, here's what we're going to do to build this culture. Yeah. Erin.
I think we might be out of time, so I just want to say that I agree with everything that everyone just said. And just to reiterate that the RDM community is really supportive across Canada. And we've, you know, we're here to answer questions. And you know, I know I ask many questions to lots of people. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. So I'll speak for everybody. But yeah, it's a really great community, and I think that we're really starting to build that. You know, that would be my biggest takeaway, is that it's a great opportunity to learn and also to grow this this community across the country.
Yeah, agreed. I've been part of this community for about 20 and a half months now, I think. And even though I've never met any of you in person, it's been a really great experience working with you all. I want to go over to Suzanne just for a couple of thoughts on the discussion today and how this is maybe resonating with what's going on at the tri-agencies around this right now.
Thanks. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and to listen into this conversation. First, I'll just say that these are my personal takeaways. I don't want to speak for the agencies. I'm just as I'm forming my thoughts, but I'm sure my colleagues would agree with me. So a few of the key takeaways from this session, but from the whole week as well, and I guess Mark will get to some of these later on, but I just sort of want to acknowledge the incredible value of the work of then Portage, now the Alliance. And I think that Canada, the Canadian research enterprise as a whole, is extraordinarily well served by this group that has started out clearly as a largely through the organizational efforts, but also the volunteer efforts. And that is incredibly clear right now how valuable that's been. I would say that you know, and it's what's being evidenced here is how much work that actually has been accomplished over the past let's say 5 years that this has been that we've started to work on a tri-agency policy. I remember being in meetings with Chuck, meetings much like this, back in the day, where what Portage had to offer was more of like a vision and what we hope to offer. And there too, when Embryo was just being formed and now the Alliance, where what it had to offer was quite hypothetical. And now it's quite real. So so that's one of my takeaways. But then, of course, listening to the challenges and how much there is left to do. So I appreciate the sort of the goodwill, the collegiality of this group, this community, and of this sort of research enterprise in Canada. More largely, the spirit of collegiality, of shared resources, of building tools that can be used by all. And for the acknowledgement that these sort of the humble acknowledgement that there are challenges, that nobody's aiming for perfection, and that it will take time to get all the pieces that in place. So those are my sort of very high level takeaways. And I've taken copious notes as you've been speaking today, and we'll be sharing them back with my tri-agency colleagues about some of the sort of going forward, what supports are needed by the research community in order to sort of meet our common ambitions of a strong research data management sort of culture for Canada.
Oh, that's great. I've been noticing the note taking out of the corner of my eye going, oh, I see a lot going down on that piece of paper that I can't see. That's great. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll get into a few questions. I think there's a number of them that we've kind of addressed as we've been going through. One that I think is really interesting here that we haven't really touched on, it's not a group we've been talking with a lot before, is for the universities that have research hospitals attached to them. How are you working with those? The tri-agency policy refers to a requirement that strategies be developed in collaboration with affiliated hospitals, or that it encompasses those hospitals. So for those of you who have those relationships, how are you working with that? Anyone?
Oh, I should put my hand up. I would just say, this is something that we're looking at this point.
Anyone else? Oh, there's an attendee.
And I think Scott had answered on behalf of U of A in the Q&A, Jennifer.
Great. So we have a couple of hands in the chat. So Susan, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Susan Babcock, Director of the Research Ethics Office, University of Alberta. Thanks, James, for my shout out, and Scott for his unstinting, relentless support. So the interesting thing about working with hospitals is that you immediately step into a whole level of heightened sensitivity around participant information. And in the case of certainly Alberta, but other provinces, you run smack into provincial legislation. And by and large, the ethics boards have figured these constraints out. And so if the researcher is bringing a DMP to their ethics application, the REB is going to say, God, this is an awesome application. We love this researcher. And then we're going to make their research work to fit both good data management principles, RDM requirements, and health legislation. So I would say in this space in particular, your REBs are really, really important for you. I don't know, James, did I blow my own horn too much? I don't know.
No, you're allowed to do that, Susan. I totally agree. Yeah, they're a really important part of the process, and I think that's probably the case across, every institution. So yeah, nothing to disagree with you on that by any means.
I will just one tag on. One of the things that's interesting is that the research ecosystem is very different in Western Canada than it is in Eastern Canada, and so the REBs that are grappling with these issues and collaterally with the research data management requirements will be REBs at tri-agency eligible health institutions. They will typically not be at post-secondary institutions. And so I don't know to what extent the conversation nationally has included those people. They are engaged via work that the Canadian Association of Research Ethics Boards is doing. So CAREP has been working with Portage for some time, and so on. So anyway, yeah, absolutely. I see Mary's comment that REBs should be consulted because REBs are charged with consideration of data management issues throughout the life cycle of the research, which frankly, I thought when a decade ago, when I started working with Chuck, I was like, wow, the TCPS actually foreshadows research data management plans. Who knew? So
it all comes together eventually, right?
I think one of my favorites still is my favorite to take tongue in cheek, but there's a lot of education out there around the long-term stewardship and management of data, beyond the active project phase, and it comes up every now and then, so to speak, but ethics says we have to destroy our data, don't they, James? And I said, yeah, well, we're going to talk to Susan about that, because that's of course not the case at all, and Susan's not saying that nor ethics, but it just goes to speak. That's one example of education, and it's really important to be able to support the researchers on the front end. And I'm thinking specifically, human participant research as an example. There's certain things that you can do at the front end when it comes to informed consent and information letters and such that can potentially allow you to be able to have the flexibility down the road to use the data again appropriately, whether that's beyond the immediate project for yourself or for others if it's a deposit scenario. So there are really critical stages, up at early, and that's on us, as us at our collective institutions and our institutional strategy working groups to work through those and get those supports in place and do that education awareness to really support the research.
Abdel, you have a question. You are able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Jennifer. Abdel Yusuf, I'm the Director of Research Computing Services at the University of Calgary. So yeah, since the data, almost 4 years ago, the School of Medicine initiated essentially a project to build research data management for healthcare data. And since that time, we actually built a platform that we released 18 months ago. It's called Secure Compute. I'm going to put a link to it on the chat, and it actually takes care of all the research data management on the active phase of research when it comes to what we call level 4 data, sensitive data, private data. And I think working with the ethics board, at the university, we have a number of them working with researchers in the School of Medicine, kinesiology, psychology, and as well as the privacy office, kind of help to put together the right policies for managing this data. And I'm happy to say that other universities are actually using this platform through collaborative research projects. So I just wanted to give an example in case, from an IT perspective, how research data is managed in that domain.
Great, thanks, Abdel. That's a great perspective to have. I'm looking at the Q&A, and I notice we've probably done a lot of these questions. So we've talked about difficulties. We've talked about legal privacy. So here's an interesting question, and I'll just finish off with this. I think a lot of institutions already have a number of policies in place that are governing different aspects of things with regards to RDM. Does it make sense in that case to be looking at, from your perspectives, looking just at what needs to be said in the RDM strategy versus duplicating what's in the other policies? Sort of adding to the arsenal rather than subsuming everything that already exists within the RDM strategy, I think is what's being gotten at here. Oui, Cynthia.
Nous, pour la stratégie institutionnelle, on a vraiment pris la décision de ne pas développer de politique GDR. On veut garder une agilité. Nous, c'est sur 3 ans qu'on la met à jour. Donc, j'admire Erin qui peut le faire sur 2 ans. Je ne vois pas comment nous réussirions. Donc, nous, sur un horizon de 3 ans, on s'est dit plutôt, on va mandater le service des affaires juridiques à faire l'analyse si l'environnement normatif de l'UQAM n'a pas des incohérences, parce que c'est des politiques qui ont été développées avant que la question de la gestion des données de recherche soit une problématique. Donc, au niveau du vocabulaire, quand dans nos politiques, on utilise le terme, mettons, résultat de la recherche, est-ce qu'on inclut vraiment les données de recherche? On veut impliquer le service des archives, mais comment la politique définit son rôle? Il y a des zones grises qu'on pense qu'on peut fonctionner. C'est dans notre stratégie de dire, ben, d'ici, on va dire 3 ans, de clarifier est-ce que nos politiques sont cohérentes, en harmonie, ou est-ce qu'ils nous recommandent au contraire d'avoir une politique spécifique parce que, justement, il n'y a pas de redondance, il faut vraiment avoir un cas particulier. Fait que je ne sais pas si ça répond à la question, mais nous, c'est notre approche.
Right, so you're not developing a research data management policy right now. You're focusing on the strategy, but you're going to be looking at how the current environment of the policies within the institution supports research data management, if there are things that are missing, if the language that's being used currently covers everything, like do products of research count as research data, or is that something different? But that's going to be an ongoing process going forward to make sure that everything is covered appropriately with the policies that are in place. Any other thoughts on how this might fit into your existing frameworks? Or if not, that's okay, because this is all part of the process. Okay, I think we have exhausted probably our panelists as well as that line of questioning. So I think this is probably a great opportunity for us to take a little break before we go into Mark's wrap up. I would just like to say thank you again so much to all of our panelists today. James Doiron, Cynthia Lisée, I'm just going as you are on my screen, Alex Hook, Erin MacPherson, Suzanne Board, and again, of course, to our interpreters who have been doing yeoman work throughout this process. Thank you all so much. This has been a great discussion.